Hey everybody, thanks for coming out. I'm just going to give it a couple of minutes while everybody gathers around. I really dig painting with alcoholinks with brushes like this, but it's unlike painting images representationally with any other kind of media. So I really wanted to talk about that first. So we'll do that while everybody's coming around. So first I'm going to flip my camera here and I'm going to show you my little setup. Okay, so here we've got my little palette, we've got my brushes, my inks are all over here, and this is my paper that I've got my original drawing on. You can see I've just made like a really light drawing. I just made it with colored pencil. When I make a painting like this, I don't tend to make too detailed a drawing because I'm going to cover up a lot of those details with ink. So I really just want to give myself a guideline as to where everything is. So today I'm going to be painting the Green Man, which is like a forest spirit, if you will. It really, the Green Man embodies a sense of nature, and a lot of times in cultural iconography, the Green Man heralds the coming of spring, but really it's just it's a symbol of our connection with nature. So I love the image of the Green Man, and I love playing with it, using different kinds of trees and stuff, because essentially it's just a human face in a foliage environment, like a face coming out of a living tree. So I went through and I've picked a couple of reference photos. I'm going to use an ash tree today. Doesn't really matter, you can just draw any leaves you want, but I love trees and I love botanical illustration and stuff, so I always like to pick a specific tree to use for my Green Man painting, but you can do whatever you like. I want to talk about my palette a little bit before I get started. I'm going to show it to you guys again, and we're going to chat. Here's what it looks like. It looks a little bit like a train wreck, but I love this palette so much. And honestly, I've had this plastic cheap palette for a really long time and literally never used it for any other medium and couldn't figure out what it was good for. And then I realized its destiny is alcoholink, and I'm never going to use it for anything else, really. I've got my color wheel essentially set up here. You can see these wells here are all dirty and weird, and I'm cleaning them out to finish my color wheel properly. I absolutely love this palette. This is my well for dirty ink, or for dirty alcohol, rather. And then I've got all kinds of other wells to mix other colors in. I like to isolate my greens around here, my reds around here. This I generally use for black and other really dark colors to keep that black from touching and dirtying up everything else. Because one thing black loves to do is spread. So I find this kind of palette absolutely perfect. I love the teeny wells because if you guys have worked with alcoholink, you know that it's got zero surface tension, so it just wants to run amok everywhere. So I find this kind of palette is absolutely ideal. So these are the tools that I'm going to be using today. I'm going to be using 3 brushes, my syringe. I'm going to be using a felt pad. Whoop, there we go. I'm using my pad to block in my background. I absolutely love using a felt pad, or sponge pad, something like that for filling in background. I could just take my image and start painting directly onto it, but honestly, I want this to have a really organic and a wild feel. I don't want it to look like a person's face just with a bunch of leaves around it. I want it to look like a tree that all of a sudden a face is starting to emerge. For me, it's totally fine if people see the tree before they see the face. You know, I'd rather that. So I'm going to use my felt pad, and I'll show you how I do that. Honestly, often I start off using a felt pad that is dirty, as it were. Like I'll use a pad like this that I've already used for other colors. Honestly, I like the different quality that it gives the color. I like the dynamic neutral colors that are created by using a pad that already has color in it. But today I'm going to use a clean one because I want to show you how I clean out the wells on my palette to make an image like this, because all of that ink is usable. Even though it looks dirty and it looks like a train wreck, it's all usable. So now I want to talk about my brushes quick. They are not good brushes. They're not high quality, but what I like about them is that I tend to keep 3 brushes like this, or 4 at all times, because honestly, alcohol ink is really tough on brushes, but I love using brushes with it, and I'm trying to figure out how. And I realized that it's tough to clean every bit of ink out of that brush. But if you keep a brush for, like, say, 1/3 of the color spectrum, as in you keep a brush for blue-green, or blue and green, you keep a brush for, like, red to yellow, you keep a brush for purple to blue, that way cleaning your brush for the next color is much easier, and you waste less ink because you don't have to take a brush that is full of purple ink and clean it completely to use yellow. So I always use 3 or 4 brushes. It keeps everything easier because honestly, this brush, even when it's dirty, impregnated with other dye, that dye, once alcohol touches it, it becomes 100% active again. So I love that. I love how economical it is. I love how every teeny drop of ink spilled can be rehydrated with alcohol and used again. That's magic to me. So I say use 3 brushes. What else? You can see that I'm wearing a glove today. I'm only wearing one, but if you're going to do any kind of work with a felt pad like this that is not just on a stamper, you're gonna want to wear a glove because all of that ink is gonna end up under your fingernails. So that's what I'm doing today. I'm just doing the Michael Jackson. I've got one glove on, and that's gonna protect my nails from cleaning my palette up over here. The only other thing that I wanted to mention before I really get started is my syringe. You absolutely need a syringe if you want to do painting like this and you want to be as careful with your alcohol as possible, because it is a lifesaver, because it means that you can just drop 1 drop at a time. Oh, I want to activate this color, 1 drop of alcohol. No more pouring alcohol from a bottle into a cup. That's over. It's all about the syringe. So I'm going to move my camera. We're going for a ride now. There we go. One sec, I'm just getting you set up over here. That's looking okay. Just making sure I got everything in here. Okie dokie. So I'm going to go right in with my felt pad. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to hydrate this ink in these wells that I want to use. So I'm just going to put a little bit of ink, or rather a little bit of alcohol in each one. I'm going to go ahead with my felt pad, and I'm just going to go in and blot up all of that ink, clean it all out, because sure, you can clean your palette with anything, paper towel and alcohol and whatever, start with new inks, but if you clean it with a felt pad like this, you can use all of that ink again, which is just amazing. And if you've noticed how costly alcohol ink painting can be, this is really a budget saver. So now I've collected a little bit of ink from my palette. I'm gonna add a little bit more alcohol, and then I'm just gonna start stamping in my background. I'm gonna start from the outside, starting from the corners. See, it's a nice light green color. I can take my pad and I can go ahead and grab even more ink. And I'm also going to use a little bit of fresh ink on my pad to freshen things up a little bit. I'm going to use some lettuce, and I'm going to use a little moss. I want a nice diffused green color. I'm just going to put some drops haphazardly on my pad there. And with the moss as well. Okay. A little bit more alcohol. Keep that all juicy. See how bright that new color that I've added is? And it's neat because if you feel like it's too solid looking, just go ahead and loosen it up with your spray bottle. Bring that color around. You can do this with your stamper, or you can just use the felt pad in your fingers. It is super easy and super accessible. It's one reason why I love this tool so much. It's just the best ink collection tool ever. It's my friend for harvesting ink. So I'm just going to bring the ink toward the center, but I'm going to keep it much paler close to the middle. Because I really want the focus to be drawn in towards the center of my composition. Oh, I'll just right here. Thank you so much. Okie dokie. You want to be careful that you don't run too rampant over your original drawing, so you can still see where things are supposed to be. But now that I've closed in on my face, I'm going to free my felt pad again, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to go in and start deepening up areas of the face that are a little darker, like his eyebrows, underneath his eyebrows. Under his cheekbones here. I really like this because I can fold it up, I can scrunch it up, I can use it as a brush essentially, but it gives you a much more natural, interesting line. I really love using this felt pad for this. Honestly, I was given felt pads like this when I first started using alcoholink, and for the longest time didn't know what the heck to do with them really, because I don't do a lot of I don't do scrapbooking, I don't do a lot of like decorative stuff, I'm not really strong on abstract art, and I just didn't really know what to do with my little stamp pads, but honestly, this is my new favorite thing to do with them, and I'm hooked for life. So there we go, I'm pretty much done with my stamp pads. So now that I've laid a little foundation, what I'm going to do is I'm going to have a look at my colors. I'm going to show you guys my color swatches here. I love using my color swatches for choosing colors. It is just awesome. I've made these on NARA paper as well, and it honestly, to me, it is such an enormous advantage being able to look quickly at what the colors look like on my support, because they don't look the same in the bottle. So today I'm going to keep using lettuce, so pull my lettuce up here. I'm going to use some limeade for some of my light tones with the lettuce and with the moss. For midtones, I think I want to use latte and maybe that's it. Dark, I want Everglades, and I want espresso. So it's going to be really nice. I've got quite a wide variety of colors here. If I don't use them all, that's totally fine. But I tend to like to have more colors at my disposal than I absolutely need, just in case. Okay. So now I'm starting with a brush. I'm going to go with my my orange to yellow brush because I'm doing brown. So it'll be a little easier to clean out after. You can see there's still ink in there. So I just wet that down a little bit, clean some of that out. Again, it's not necessary that it's 100% clean unless you absolutely want this to look like, oh, well, this color is a perfect example of espresso. This color is a perfect example of teak. That's totally fine. But if that's not your goal, don't be afraid to mix it up. Okay, so I'm going in with a little bit of espresso here with my brush. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to refine all of the darkest tones. I'm going to draw in Facial features, I'm going to close in around his eyes a little bit here. Now, I'm being I'm going to be very generous and voluptuous with my green man's wrinkles, because I want him to look as old as the hills, or older, you know, like the tree that Tom Bombadil sat at the foot of in his boyhood, something like that. So I'm just going to go through. Again, I'm not, you can see I'm not trying to keep my lines clean. I want it to have a sketchy look. I want it to look wild and untamed. Which is one of the reasons why a painting like this is fun, because you really can just let your brush go. It doesn't have to be perfect. Just let your brush glide over the surface and see what comes of it. It's a lot of fun. It's liberating painting like that, where it doesn't absolutely have to fall in the perfect place. It doesn't have to look like a photograph. We're just having fun, enjoying the ink process, enjoying the surprises, the happy accidents, you know. It's one of my favorite things about painting with ink, because you never know where it's gonna go. It's so cool. You can totally plan a project. Not saying you can't plan, but you always have to afford for a little bit of whimsy, a little bit of a surprise, because, you know, alcoholinks are fraught with mystery, and that's great. You just have to work it. You can't expect them to act like watercolors. You can't expect them to act like oil paints or like acrylic paints. They just don't. They just don't, and so, you know, we got to work with that. My ink is drying up a little bit over here, so I'm just going to add a drop of alcohol. Just a drop, because I don't want to dilute it too much. I also don't want to waste alcohol. So, just a teeny bit at a time. So I'm going to go through and I'm going to start outlining leaves. His beard and hair is all these beautiful ash leaves. So I'm not going to make a hard outline. I'm not using a marker here. I'm just using really loose, carefree lines to mark in my leaves. It's true, there are some areas where the ink base that I have laid over, it makes it difficult to see where I've drawn my leaves. But you know what? That's totally fine. I know what leaves look like. And like I say, we're not trying to reproduce a photograph here. We're just having fun. So I'm not worrying too much about that. Where I can't see my drawing underneath, I just draw new leaves. I want to keep all my brushwork here, especially in this stage, super loose, because I don't want it to have too illustraty a quality. I don't want it to look too solid. I don't want to have big, heavy black outlines. And that's one reason why I'm using a nice, beautiful brown color to establish the first of my dark tones, because I don't want to lose the looseness and the brightness of it. Looks like I need some more ink over here. I'm just going one or two drops at a time, you know, because that's really all it takes. A couple drops at a time, and away you go. And remember, if you put too much in your palette, it's not the end of the world, because that ink is still as beautiful and usable and viable next week as it is right now when you put it in your palette. So don't worry about it. If you put too much, it dries up. It's not a waste. It's not like you're painting with acrylic paints and you let a bunch of paint dry on your palette. That is 100% a loss. There is no recuperation there. There's nothing you can do with that paint. It is now a piece of plastic that, I don't know, you can turn into a fridge magnet. But you can't paint with it anymore. That's what I love so much about alcoholink, because it's totally an accessible medium to paint with for the average painter. You can make totally exceptional paintings with it. But if you're painting and you're making this beautiful green man, right, and you're totally in the zone, and then all of a sudden the phone rings and you have to go pick your kid up from school, or you have to go to the hospital, or you have to turn over your laundry or anything, that painting will be waiting for you when you return, and those inks will activate as soon as they get touched by alcohol. So there's no stress, you know. I could leave this painting right now and abandon it and come back to it next week, and effectively the results will be the same, pretty much. So, you know, be courageous. Don't worry about starting a big project. Don't think, oh well, I don't want to start on this big beautiful NARA paper because what if I can't finish it? What if I get stopped and then it doesn't look right? That kind of problem just doesn't exist with this kind of ink and this kind of substrate, especially on NARA paper, because you can erase it 100%. When I first started using NARA paper, I made a little product review on my YouTube channel, and I tested out the erasability of the paper, and I was just floored. I was absolutely shocked, because I made like a little test painting. I painted all over, well, I inked randomly all over a piece of NARA paper and left it till the next day, and it all just erased off so beautifully. And I ended up painting a picture on top of it with a totally different color palette, and you know, you never ever would have known the difference. It was just like magic. You can see here I've got kind of a wavy line. I had a little bit too much alcohol in my paint, or in my ink, but I'm gonna go with that. There's nothing wrong with that. I could sharpen that line up if I wanted to, but I'm just gonna go back over it with a little bit of less diluted ink and clean it up. I'm not too worried. I'm not too worried. Couple of leaves just sort of overlapping his forehead here. Look really natural, you know. Like he's just emerging from the forest. Like you were looking at the bowl of an ash tree and he just popped out. Very soon I'm going to be done with this little drawing part, and then what we're going to do is we're going to shift gears. We're going to concentrate on the mid-tones, the middle values. So I'm going to take my green brush and start blocking in middle values with that one. Probably using my lettuce and my limeade and my latte. A little bit more to activate this. Okay. Honestly, at this point, I'm not even looking at where my drawing is underneath. I'm just painting leaves. I gave myself a relatively thorough drawing of my leaves underneath, just in case I really wanted to play it by the book, but I find at this stage, when I'm almost done the drawing, I kind of tend to just let the drawing fly wherever it wants to, and let the chips fall where they may. It's a little bit more fun. So the last thing I'm going to do before I move to my midtones is I'm just going to push back a little bit of my darks. So I'm going to take one more drop of espresso, and I'm going to start filling in a couple of darker areas. I'm looking at my reference photos, both of my ash tree, and I just kind of took a couple of photos of people's faces. I am not following one reference here, and I encourage you to use more than one reference photo, because unless you're trying to make a portrait of a particular person, that's not the goal here. So have a look at your reference photo. Think, oh, where do the shadows lie? There might be shadows here underneath these leaves at his forehead. There might be a shadow over here underneath those leaves, you know. Maybe, who knows? There could be. Underneath his mustache. I'm going to go to the corners a little bit because I want the corners of my composition to be darker than the center, because I really want the focus to be drawn right into the middle of the paper. So I'm going to take care to concentrate my dark tones the most around the outside. However, don't worry if you find that when you're doing your darks and your midtones, don't worry if you find that all of a sudden you look at it and you've darkened it too much, your highlights are covered up. Don't worry. Don't worry, my friends. If you're using NARA paper, there is no limit to how much you can ink and erase and ink and erase and ink and erase. I still have not made a test that has failed in that. So be courageous with your ink. The worst that will happen is, well, maybe you'll waste a little bit of ink because you find you've laid some ink down that you want to erase later. Big deal. It's all part of the learning process, right? Okay, so time to switch gears. I'm just going to clean out my brush a little bit because if I want to use it for yellows or oranges, it's going to be brown dirty. I like using my syringe for this as well because you can meter out just 1 drop, 2 drops of alcohol. Clean your brushes without having a cup of alcohol on the side. It really, really makes a huge difference. So I think I'm going in with green, so I'm going to use my green brush. I want to see how much green I still have in this and what kind of green, really. So let's check that out. Clean it up a little bit. Okay. So now I'm going to put a little bit of lettuce in my palette right over here. I already have a spot where I was using lettuce before, so I'm just going to put it in the same place. Okay, so now I want to think about my midtones. I want to think about not the darkest, but not the lightest either. So I'm thinking here on the bottom of his cheek, because if the light's falling from the top, there's going to be a shadow underneath there. And there's also going to be a shadow under his eye here. So I'm just filling that in. I'm just trying to avoid the absolute lightest areas. So that would be like the tip of his nose, the bridge of his nose. There'd be a nice highlight there. I'm thinking about where light would fall on the leaves, where the midtones would fall on the leaves. I'm thinking about the fact that a leaf is often creased in the middle along the center vein. So often one side of the leaf is in lower light than the other. So I'm playing with that. Don't worry when you're filling the face in, don't worry about making it perfect. Worry about not having enough wrinkles. Don't try to make it look like a photograph. It's a woodland spirit, and you know what? He can look like whatever you want him to look like. Here. I like this lettuce color. It's not really the color of lettuce, but it is beautiful. It's a lovely olivey green, and I love it. I find it a very versatile color. I love bright colors. Don't get me wrong. I absolutely adore bright colors, but I also really dig more, I would say, halfway neutral tones. They really give a sense of variety, almost a sense of adventure, you know, because you're not afraid to use a less cookie cutter color, you know. A green that's a little dirtier, it's got a little brown in it maybe. That's okay. That's okay. When you look in nature, you walk through the forest, you see 80 million different kinds of green. So that's kind of what I'm trying to show here. If you hear a lot of clicking, it's just because I got dogs and they're walking around behind me, so don't worry about it. No, it's okay. It's okay. We have dogs. People will hear dogs walking. It's all right. They're not going to drown out me talking, so. Not much drowns out the sound of my voice. Just leave the dogs running. Leave it. Okay. Yeah, don't worry if you hear little background noises of dog toenails clicking on my floor. It's just, you know, life with fur babies. Now, you can see my palette that, or can you see? Am I positioned right? Yeah. You can see in my palette that where I've got my lettuce, there's also other green around that, and I'm totally going to embrace that. I'm just going to wet that down with alcohol and mix it into the color that I'm already using, develop a different green, a richer mid-tone, you know? Going through and tending my tree leaves, as it were. I like to leave little areas on a leaf empty to give a teeny bit of a shine. I don't want to have to take that ink away later. I totally can. I can go and lift it out later with a Q-tip or even just with a paintbrush. But I enjoy the brushy quality of that highlight left by a brush that just missed its mark, you know? I'm really enjoying this this super pale green that I'm working with here, so I'm going to use a little bit in his face as well. Remember that the motion of your brush stroke will give movement to the leaf that you're painting. So think about the shape of the leaf. Don't just try to paint by numbers. Think about how the leaf would be moving. Think about the flow. Think about what it looks like when a wind blows on that leaf. And you know, there are 1,000 leaves in this composition, so have fun with them. Try something new that you don't know if it'll work. Heck, I do that all the time, even in paintings that paintings that I want to look really beautiful and polished at the end, it's each composition, each painting is still the opportunity for immense amounts of personal growth as a painter. So don't worry to experiment with different techniques. Don't think, oh, maybe I'll mess this painting up. Honestly, the other day I was working on a pet portrait for my stepmom, and it wasn't in alcoholink, but it still translates. I was doing a pet portrait in watercolor, and I was totally in the zone. I enjoyed it so much. I was having so much fun, and then I stood back and looked at it when it was done, and it wasn't at all what I wanted it to be. At all. It was totally different. It was a loss. 100% a loss. But you know, that's not the end of the world either. It happens. Sometimes we paint something and it doesn't turn out the way we wanted it to look, but that's okay. That's okay. There's no great loss in that. The loss in that is not going back and trying to learn something from it. The loss is having been discouraged and not going back to figure out a better way. Not going back to a second try. I can say that I totally did revisit that painting the day after, and I really, really love the result. And you know what? We can't be too discouraged by failure. I use quotations because failure is such an interesting word. It denotes that we have done something that didn't work. But honestly, we learn more from our failures than from our successes. So bring it on, you know? Bring on the failure. Bring on the learning experience. I mean, heck, with these papers, a failure is not even a failure, because if you don't like it, if I don't like this painting, I could literally wash the paper off with alcohol and do it again tomorrow. And do it again the next day, and the next day, and the next day, and the next day, until I get it right. So there's no pressure. You could literally buy one sheet of NARA paper and paint on it until you adore what it's like, and then seal it. You know, it is that accessible. I adore it. So I'm doing much the same thing with my moss that I was doing with the lettuce green. Just keeping it light, filling in my leaves. Whoa, my syringe fell into my ink. Don't worry about painting in every single centimeter of every single leaf. Do not worry. That's one of the reasons why I like going over my background with my stamp pad, because it gives a nice dynamic base that, you know, you can really work almost anything on top of. And, well, if one of those stamp marks falls in the middle of something that I don't want it on, well, I just clean it off and proceed. So, that's pretty cool. So now I'm nearly satisfied with my midtones here. So I'm going to start going in with darks. It's the kind of thing that you can absolutely move between your darks and your midtones, even your lights, because alcohol ink dries so quickly. There's not much danger in there. You can move between darks and lights, and the inks, unless you're using a lot of alcohol, the inks dry literally in seconds or minutes. So you can work on your midtones, go and start working in your darks. With my darks, I'm going to start from the corners. I've got some Everglades here. I absolutely adore this color. It's just a beautiful, super deep forest green. Right now I'm using Tim Holtz Ranger inks, although in the future I really look forward to trying NARA's inks. However, I'm not in India, so I will have to wait a little bit, but I'm pretty excited about that. get some more ink in here. Whoops. So I'm just paying attention to each corner, thinking about the shadows underneath those leaves, thinking about where they would gather, those dark foresty shadows. Thinking about keeping the corners of my composition darker than the center. You can see that I have a good deal of tone, or a good deal of value rather, built up in the center in his face. But, like I say, even if later on I find that I have too much dark concentrated in the center, I can always go and lift out that color, so I'm not too worried about it. I'd rather, as I have the luxury of doing this, I would rather build up more color and see what it looks like, and then erase back. You know, you couldn't imagine what a dream it would be like being able to do that with watercolor paint. You know, lay it on and then, oh, well, not what I wanted. Oh, well, I'll just erase that. You know, imagine. It would revolutionize watercolor painting. Just one of the things that I love about these inks. Honestly, 6 months ago, I didn't know what alcohol ink was. And now it is my absolute favorite medium. I've been painting essentially my entire life. With acrylics, with watercolors, a little bit with oil. I've been drawing my whole life. I absolutely adore it. But for some reason, I never came across alcohol inks before, and I was given a mini set, you know, like 3 colors, of alcohol inks for Mother's Day this year, and oh my lord, it was a game changer. Game changer, absolutely. I did some research on it when I first started painting with them, and I thought, you know, I'm going to learn as much about these inks as I possibly can. And I read everywhere that, oh my lord, alcohol ink is the most vibrant color that you can paint with. The colors are out of this world, and I am personally absolutely obsessed with color. I adore colors. If you guys have seen anything that I've painted, I can't get enough. I love every color. My favorite color is a rainbow. So, and honestly, when I read this, I thought, how could that be? You know, I've been painting with acrylic paints and oil paints and watercolor paints for so long, and they have beautiful colors. But how could the colors of these inks be any brighter, any more colorful than any others? It just didn't seem to make sense. And you know what? I can't explain it either. But they were 100% correct in that. There's nothing clear and vibrant like the color of alcohol inks. No idea. I had no idea before what the difference would be. But it's just wow. This has been a huge learning experience for me that I have really, really, really enjoyed. Which is one of the reasons why it's so awesome to have been invited to do this tutorial for you guys here today, because, yeah, wow. It's my new favorite medium, alcohol ink, and literally since I started using NARA paper about 5 months ago, I literally have not used a single sheet of Yupo. I have not used a single other alcohol ink medium, or support rather. So it's so special that you gotta try it to know. You just absolutely have to. For using these inks for paintings like this, I suggest you invest in a couple of brushes so that you can, like I said before, keep a a yellow to red brush, keep a green to blue brush, etc. Don't invest in the highest quality brushes because these inks are not easy on brushes, and cleaning them with alcohol is not easy on brushes. Like, what I'm using here is really just poor quality, a student quality acrylic brush with synthetic bristles, and really, honestly, as what I've learned in the last 5 months painting with these inks, that's all you need. Honestly, I kind of like, I have this other brush that I use that you can see that its bristles are a little frayed. The tip of the brush does not come to a real point, like a beautiful, high-quality round brush, but honestly, I love the wispy, grassy quality of the lines and the brush strokes that I get with it. When I first started with alcoholinks, I thought that brush strokes were not possible at all. I thought that you couldn't do it because of the low surface tension and because of the amount of alcohol. I thought that you couldn't do it. I thought that a brushy line like that was just not possible. And I personally love brush strokes. I love them, love them, love them. I want to see brush strokes on everything that I've made. I don't want it to look like a photo. If I wanted it to look like a photo, I would have just taken a photo. You know, that's not really, it's not my passion. So I love being able to, see those little brush strokes everywhere in my work. It's so much fun. I really, 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 really enjoy it. So when you want to do that, you just have to be really careful about the amount of alcohol that you have. If like I just put this alcohol into my palette, or this ink into my palette rather, if I use it and it spreads more than I want it to, all I have to do is let that ink evaporate for a couple of seconds, a minute maybe, and it will be thicker and darker. It doesn't take long. It doesn't take a lot of waiting. It doesn't take alchemy and magic and blending tools, and it just takes a second of patience to let that ink evaporate, or to let that alcohol evaporate, and then you know what? You're on the road with the beautiful color that you wanted all along. So it's so easy. It's just all about alcohol quantity in your dye. You got to think about the alcohol as the vehicle that is transporting the dye on the paper. And if you've got a vehicle that's moving too fast, then it's going to go somewhere that you don't want it to. You know what I mean? So work on controlling the amount of alcohol in your dye mix, and you will totally be rewarded with beautiful brush strokes. You will be rewarded with a composition that's easier to control. Here I'm working with more and more alcohol in this Everglades, so it's giving me this really, really nice pale green color that I'm just going to use everywhere. I want a little bit more light green somewhere. Oh, maybe there. Oh, maybe here. And some there, and some there, and some over here. This stage in the painting, I'm really just having fun. In a couple minutes, what I'm going to do is I'm going to do my finishing touches, and I'm going to do that with a Sharpie. I feel like there are a lot of artists, or some artists at least, who think that finishing touches with a Sharpie is a cheat, and it totally could be. But I still adore it, and I suggest you do it if you like it, because I really like the sketchy quality that making your finishing touches with a Sharpie gives you. So I'm going to do that right now. Grab my little Sharpie. I'm going to use a fine tip Sharpie because I just want to have some light wispy lines. I'm going to go in the wrinkles on his face here. When you do this, be careful that you're not working into dye that's still really wet, because, well, that Sharpie will activate too. Remember that it's just another alcohol ink, so you got to be careful with it. Again, here with my lines, I'm not trying to make a really specific drawing. I want it to look wild and gnarly and natural and organic, so don't worry about using cross-hatching and like be really luxurious with those wrinkles in his face. Like Father Time, you know? Wherever you want. If you want to concentrate all of the finishing touches on the face, do it. If you want to draw leaves all the way to the outside of your composition, do that. It's you that decides, right? It's your world, like Bob Ross says. And he's right, you know? Especially when you're painting. When is there a time that it is more your world than when you're painting, right? It's then that we can create, well, whatever we want to see in the world. I read, now I can't remember who wrote it now, but I read that an author once wrote, when I want to read a good story, I write one. And I'm not the greatest at writing stories, but I totally saw that as a truth in my life. You know, when I want to see something beautiful in this world, well, I create something beautiful. It's easy. It's as easy as that. And it can be, you know. You want to see something beautiful in the world? Make something. If it's not beautiful as you intended it to be, well, make something else. Make it again. Remake it. Fix it up. Life is just full of opportunities for improving, opportunities for learning. I'm going to keep doing this for just another second, and then I'm going to check to see if anybody's got any questions, because I'm totally running out of time here. And I don't want Instagram to cut me off. Okay. So I'm going to stop there and flip my camera. We're going for a ride. Whoop. Okay. So, how much time do I have? I got 8 minutes. Okay, so now I'm going to have a look at your questions here. I'm going to see what we've got. Affected by how much water? Well, yeah, affected by how much alcohol you use. Absolutely. Really, your alcohol ratio is the absolute most important thing here, because it's the difference between having a super brushy, dark stroke that just swipes across your page and a bloom that runs over your page where it wants to. Same ink, different quantity of alcohol, 1000% different result. Reference for the image, honestly, I looked for stock-free photos of ash trees. I looked for stock-free portrait photos, and I took a couple of photos of like bearded men and ash trees, and I really just kept those for color reference and for a little bit of detail reference. But that was all. I didn't use one reference. I like to use a jumble of references because I don't want to create one particular photo. What paper am I using? I'm using a 12 by 12 sheet of NARA paper. How do I seal? I use Kmar varnish, UV protective varnish, and triple thick glaze on NARA paper. I found that the glaze, for some reason, didn't work really well with alcoholink on canvas, so I'm still working on that. But for these papers, those are my sealants. A couple of coats of each, about 24 hours of like cure time in between each varnish. And yeah, those are the 3 that I use. Are you using alcoholinks? Yes, I am. This is 100% alcoholink. There's no other color, no other medium in here. 100% alcohol. Yeah, sorry about the glare. I know my lighting is not ultimate, and especially for shiny media like the alcoholink, it's tough. So I'm sorry that there was a little bit of glare, but yeah, the pen that I used is just a Sharpie. It's a fine tip Sharpie. I'm going to grab my little Sharpie here. It's just a normal run-of-the-mill fine tip Sharpie. You can get it at the dollar store, you can get it at the drugstore, anything. I have a little collection of Sharpies that I like to use for embellishing details and stuff. Honestly, all run-of-the-mill Sharpies. I did buy a couple of Tim Holtz white pens for doing extra little highlights, extra little embellishments at the end. But honestly, I use the Sharpies 1,000 times more. So, was there any other questions that I didn't get to, I don't think? I think that is pretty much everybody. I don't see any other questions. They dried muted? Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. You'll find, much like with watercolors, the ink that you put down, it will look really, really bright and dark as soon as the alcohol evaporates out of it, and you will find that you have more muted tones. And the areas that are more muted, I'm just gonna bring you over here. Oh, wait. The areas that are more muted are areas where I had a lot more alcohol. So you can see in here, like in the tip of his nose, this was nearly undiluted ink. So it's nice and dark. And up here too, once it dried, it did not lighten much, but you will definitely find that when you use highly diluted ink, like I did in here, this is a great example because this is the exact same color of ink. This is Everglades as well, but it's Everglades with a ton of alcohol. So it's really cool. You can get all different kinds of tones just from that one color of ink. It's super, super cool. All it takes is a little bit of alcohol to dilute it, or a little bit of time to evaporate that ink to leave a nice dark color left over. It's all in the alcohol ratio. So I encourage you guys to play with it because it's really the only way to know. It's really the ideal way to learn about it because I can explain a lot of things to you guys that I have learned in the last few months, but oh my lord, there is absolutely nothing like practicing it. So if you guys like this painting, if you think it's cool, please try it. I would absolutely love to see your paintings, love to see the results, because it's such a special kind of painting. It's such a special kind of paper to paint on. It's just, like I said, I've been painting my whole life, and honestly, this whole alcohol thing just blows my mind. Looks like, I only have 10 seconds left, so thank you so much, guys, for joining me. I really enjoyed this. I had an awesome time. Thank you so much, NARA, for inviting me to do this tutorial. It was just a ton of fun. I hope you guys liked it. I hope you liked my painting, and I will see you all soon, I hope.